the areas that we kind of mentioned that when we went through was very important to us to learn a lot about. Central Off, we are a district of about 7,000 students. There's going to be, as we launch the rest of 7 through 12, about 3,000 students involved. So because we're a smaller district, we are allowed to be a little more interactive, a little more hands-on. Central Office, though, for us has played a huge part of finding ways to make things available for our teachers. We want our teachers to be able to do whatever they can come up with, whatever they can dream of, but we also take the attitude here that we want to do it in a very cost-effective manner. When the teacher comes up with an idea, we support them to find the way that they can do it, whatever they want in the classroom, use the technology they have. So Central Office plays an important part here in our district of helping support those teachers in the individual classroom. Infrastructure you see on there, infrastructure was a big step for us, as it is, I'm sure, for everybody. But we have learned quickly that as long as the infrastructure is there, the teachers are much more willing to use and jump on board with some of the project-based learning and technology in the classroom when they know it's going to work. And so we know how important it is to make sure that infrastructure builds there. By focusing on BYOD, though, that has really allowed us to focus other money towards infrastructure to keep that up and running. We also, too, we have a situation here in Westfield that about 3% of our community does not have home connection. We've really been able to work with the city and come up with a couple of different ideas as new housing additions come into that northern part of the city to make sure we get internet there in a hurry because we let them know how important it is to their educational career, and our city works great with us on making sure we come through with that. The other part that's important to us is making sure all your forms are up to date. I'm sure as many of the districts listening, you all of a sudden look at a policy, and most of your original policies were written to the point that it was restrictive and prohibitive to technology. You want to make sure you rewrite all of those policies to make sure that they are as open as they possibly can be for students and teachers to be as creative as they possibly want to be in the classroom. It does change. I know I heard Gordon mention that it changes the roles of the teacher. The teacher is a lot more of a facilitator in a classroom and not as much as the person that stands in the front and gives the information. Our teachers have really eaten that part up, and we really appreciate the efforts they've given there. And the community being involved. Interesting part, we really planned a lot of community meetings when we first started going to this, and we really thought that we would have some parent pushback, and our community has supported us going BYOD so far with open arms. They really see the benefits of it as they do in their own jobs, but also for that college down the road. I mentioned under too, we also do give students an opportunity to rent if they want to. We do this as a one-time where we're heading to. We use this as a one-time. You have the first 2 weeks of school as the plan to basically decide if you're going to rent or if you're going to bring your own, and then there's no turning point at that because it allows us to budget what we need to do in terms of who we rent for. That'll become a bigger issue for us as we go to a much larger scale here in the next school year. Our next steps of BYOD and where we're out, we're basically, as I said, we're launching it full scale here in the next school year. We're surveying teachers and the community. We've done it a couple times, mainly because we want to see where they stand and make sure that we're still in line with what they have as intentions for the program. We are also, one thing we haven't taken advantage of yet that we've learned through our visits to other people is to get students more involved. We had a few, but we also want to make, for example, when we're talking to the community, we want students standing there showing the difference. It's easy for me to sit there and say, hey, this is great and something we need to move to, but having a student sit there and show what they've done, or having some of our graduates come back and show how much they learned and how much of an advantage they had in college because they were able to take part in many of these things here in high school is an integral part of the success of a program. We also realized, too, one other mistake that we didn't do right away that we know we're starting to build is because of the breakdowns, because of the technical difficulties, and because of future job aspirations of several of the kids, we want to make sure that we develop a course at the high school where the kids are doing a lot of the tech work and helping out. Right now we're working through our Department of Education to find out if it's an elective. We don't want to take away AP opportunities from the kids. and we're also working on actually who would teach and run that course. But we do know through some of the local colleges, Ivy Tech, et cetera, they've talked about courses very similar, so we're actually getting information through them to try to put together at the high school level. And that's kind of where we're at with Westfield Washington schools. I know that, like I said, we wanted to just kind of present some of the missteps and some of the ideas that we've received from other schools and been very appreciative of over the last couple of years. Um, I think Jackie, are you coming back on here, or is it going, Marcy, you coming back and taking over? We'll be happy to answer any questions if you'd like us to, too.
Thanks, Dave. This is Jackie. We do have some questions. I've been monitoring them in the chat window. And, of course, if you do have a question during this time, please make sure that you indicate that in the chat window. I have a question really for both districts. The question was, what types of changes are you observing in the classroom, that learning and teaching? How is it changing that you've observed?
I don't know if I can speak for our courses, because right now the ones that are used on a regular basis are, if you will, the most fun classes to go see on occasion. The engagement of the students when they get to use those tools on a regular basis has really enhanced in those classrooms. So that's probably the number one factor. But also the problem-solving skills we're seeing in those kiddos is advanced, because you throw an idea out there and you let them solve it on themselves, and there's no better access than through technology to be able to try to work on those personal skills.
And Fairfax County, what changes have you observed in the classroom?
I agree with Dave. I think having that ready access all the time in the classroom allows the students to go a little further than what we expected them to go. We're seeing kids being more organized because it's their device. They put everything on their device. They're excited to put their homework on their device or any reminders that they have to do. So the work is getting turned in more often from most of those students who are bringing in their own devices. They're also, as Dave mentioned, that problem solving. They're trying to figure out new ways of doing things. And we're telling teachers that if you want your students to be doing a presentation for one of your assignments, you don't tell them how to do the presentation. Let the kids figure out what's the best tool that they have access to complete that presentation. Let them think about what the best way is to share that information. So I think that whole piece, that providing students with their own tool, let them decide about their learning and where they're going to go and where they're going to take it.
To build off of that, Diane, one of our questions that we just got was, and this is for both districts, do you allow some of those devices to be cell phones? I know there's a lot of controversy there, but do you allow cell phones as part of the Bring Your Own Device program?
Well, in Fairfax County, we let the school administrator kind of monitor what they want to happen at their school, and at many schools, cell phones, yes, are allowed, and they do put some guidelines as to how that device can be used. They're not using the telephone portion of that; they're using mostly the web. The unfortunate part about that is our web filtering does not filter the phones, and so that's a big concern. Gordon, you might want to talk more about that. Do you have any other things in place that we might be looking at, or?
Well, just to say that obviously the filtering is a big deal for us. So obviously internet content filtering is important, and so one of the things that we have the parents and the students sign off on is that when they're going to be using their device within the school environment, that they'll do so using the Wi-Fi capability and not use the 3G. So we do stress that if they're going to use a smartphone, that they're using it in the context of our Wi-Fi, in which that filtering is in place. And so that's something we constantly look at. But obviously, student safety and security is of utmost interest there.
What about Mark, Dave, and Dan? How are you at Westfield, Washington, dealing with using cell phones as part of your bringing your own device culture at schools and districts?
Yeah, this is Dan. Basically, we don't allow cell phones. One of the stipulations we put on the devices they bring is the screen has to be 6 inches or larger. And part of that was to alleviate some pushback we might have received from teachers because of the stigma that is associated with cell phones. And part of it speaks to what Gordon just spoke to. You know, the filtering really worries me with E-rate eligibility. If they use the device in school, I believe that we have to be able to filter it at home too when they're off campus. And if they use the device at school, they're not going through our filtering system if they're on the 3G or 4G network. So we worried about that, so we do not allow them at this time.
Somebody mentioned earlier too that there was what specs did we ask our parents to look into. We let parents use whatever type of device they want to use. The only things we ask is they need to have some sort of word type product, if you will, something to type on, you know, whatever type of keyboard, and also internet connectivity. Those are the only 3 things we tell parents they need to find outside the 6-inch screen monitor that they have to choose when they do a device.
Thank you, both districts, for the answer to that question. We've had a few other questions come in. Looking at our time, I'm going to kind of combine some questions. There were a lot of questions concerning teachers in the classroom and how they're feeling about the bring your own device. So this is a little bit of a multi-layered question. One, do teachers in fact bring their own device, or are they more comfortable using the device issued by the school or district? And 2, are there any habits that teachers have that you're either struggling to break and or encourage that you're finding to be significant, maybe a little bit difficult for them to break, and or something you want them to do that they're struggling with?
This is Diane. One of the things that the teachers had so much fear over is that they feel as though they're losing control over what the kids are doing on their devices because the teacher's in the front of the room and the kids have their device right in front of them. So that's a whole teaching issue. It's how are you planning for instruction? How are you planning for the use of technology within your classroom? We found that the students who are not embracing BYOD are not the students. Those teachers who are not embracing BYOD are those teachers who don't embrace the use of technology anyway in their classrooms. So those are the teachers that we're going to need to start to target and just begin with working with can they use technology in their classroom to support teaching and learning. So that's something that we know that we're going to have to face. They are never going to let students bring their own devices in their classroom if they don't yet understand the benefits for using it. That whole self-directed student, allowing students to learn on their own and direct their learning, that's a hard piece for some teachers as well. They like to be in total control of what they're learning, what they're seeing, what they're doing, and how they're doing it. So providing that opportunity for students to try things out on their own and have the teacher more or less walking throughout the classroom and not necessarily being the main person in the front of the room directing their learning.
We agree that answers right along the alley. What we'd say, we're about 50-50 on teachers either bring their own or use something that the school has available. I would say the one thing that we talk to teachers about to make sure that the devices in the classroom don't become, or we do not want them to become, glorified note takers. If you think of it that way, that we don't want the kids just out there typing notes on a notepad, that we want them exploring. That seems to have really helped our teachers in that simple manner of kind of put ideas together of what they want to use the devices for.
Thank you. And building off of that, we had one final question about the worries of theft and loss. And Dave, I see you've answered a bit of that in the chat window. For both districts, is there a fear of theft and loss with this bring your own device policy?
Yeah, I was just typing that in there because that was when we did all our pre-planning, that was a big concern of all ours. How are we going to handle it when they get broken, when another student knocks it out of a kiddo's hands? Over 3 years now, we've had 0 incidents, knock on wood. I'm sure one just occurred because I said that. But 0 incidents so far, because what we're finding when you watch the kiddos, when it comes, yes, some of them drop their cell phone on occasion, but these